Tonight on Brian Ross Investigates, kidnapped and held for ransom. America got tough with kidnappers after the Lindbergh baby was kidnapped in the 1930s. Now there are new victims, American hospitals, schools, government agencies, as hackers take over computer systems and lock up what's on them, demanding ransom to unlock them.
City's email system is shut down.
Cities in Florida have paid hundreds of thousands of dollars to get their data freed. So have hospitals and schools around the country.
Insurance will cover most of the untraceable 65 Bitcoin demanded, equal to about $600,000. The city paying a $25,000 deductible.
Should governments give in to these online criminals? What will it take to stop it? Plus, the unexpected death of a popular young baseball player, Tyler Skaggs, mourned by his teammates for the Los Angeles Angels. But now it turns out he died with 2 opioids in his blood, and his family claims someone working for the Los Angeles Angels may have helped him get the drugs. And our shout out for the reporter who's breaking big stories on union corruption with an FBI raid on the home of the president of the UAW, one of the country's most powerful and influential labor leaders.
One of the neighbors across the street could see agents in the garage counting what this neighbor described as wads of cash.
From the Law and Crime Network studios in New York City's Herald Square, this is Brian Ross Investigates. And good evening and welcome. Tonight, a close look at a very 21st century kind of crime wave. Kidnappers demanding and getting huge ransoms, not from taking children or celebrities, but from hacking into the computers of schools, hospitals, local, state, and federal governments, taking their files and data captive. The victims say they often have no choice if they want to get their vital and valuable data back: medical files, school records, government documents.
The kidnapping of little Charles A. Lindbergh Jr. was a tragedy not only to Colonel and Mrs. Lindbergh, but to the nation.
America got tough with kidnappers after the child of aviator Charles Lindbergh was kidnapped in 1932.
And this is Bernard Richard Hauptmann, 35, whose arrest as Lindbergh ransom collector in the kidnapping has aroused America. Make an example of the kidnappers and let the punishment fit the crime. In this garage across the street from the Hauptmann home, $13,750 of the ransom money shown here was found.
Now across America, from small towns to big cities, modern-day kidnappers are taking computer systems hostage and demanding big ransoms to unlock them. In Atlanta, the city was hit last year with what was called the Sam virus, freezing the courts, airport Wi-Fi, online bill payments, footage from police dashboard cameras.
It was extremely disruptive to the city, but this has happened to people worldwide.
Federal prosecutors have now indicted 2 Iranians, charging them with the so-called Sam virus attack.
We're here to announce that a federal grand jury in New Jersey indicted 2 Iranian citizens for a 3-year scheme that involved hacking into computers of hospitals, municipalities, public institutions, and businesses in the United States and in other countries.
And just this summer, more than 20 small towns in Texas got hit, faced with paying a ransom or potentially losing all of their vital files and documents.
Britain National Health Service was hit first, forcing hospitals to stop what they were doing because they couldn't access patient records. And as of this morning, it's estimated there are some 200,000 victims in 150 countries.
Many cities have paid.
Lake City's email system is shut down.
Lake City in Florida reportedly put up $460,000. Riviera Beach in Florida reportedly paid some $600,000 to get its files freed.
The city finally acknowledged a successful hacking attempt that the city will indeed pay ransom on. Insurance will cover most of the untraceable 65 Bitcoin demanded, equal to about $600,000. The city paying a $25,000 deductible.
And a report by WNBC TV in New York found several New York school districts had been targeted. Some paid, some did not.
Well, Natalie, the first day of school will now be held on Thursday. We've actually had multiple cyber attacks on local school districts recently, and in some cases, the hackers have even held the school's data for ransom.
And we're joined now by the mayor of Lake City, Florida, Stephen Witt, and by Rob Konecki, the former director for cybersecurity policy at the National Security Council, now a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, and co-author of the new book about cybercrime and cyber war, The Fifth Domain. Thank you both for joining us. Mr. Mayor, let me start by asking you, why did you agree to pay the ransom?
Well, it was a tough decision, but based on the information we had, what we were looking at, one of the biggest things was it was possible we never could have recovered the information that was locked up. The insurance, as y'all stated earlier, paid all of it but $10,000. We paid $10,000.
And do you have your documents back now?
Yes, there wasn't any guarantee that we'd get them, but I felt like, if they didn't do it that time, then it would kind of prevent them from ever doing it again because people wouldn't believe them. But it took us several weeks to get it all back.
And you trusted them enough to send them that much money in Bitcoins?
Well, with a lot of advice, and the insurance company really took the big risk.
All right. Well, Rob Konecki, let me ask you, from your point of view, should cities like Lake City, Florida, and others, should they pay the ransom?
I think it's a really tough call. I think what cities like Lakeview are dealing with is the fact that if they don't pay the ransom, they are going to lose this information forever. It's not going to be recoverable, and they're going to have to revert to paper files, to re-requesting data from their citizens. So it can really impact operations. That said, what we've done by allowing ransoms to be paid is essentially help to arm our adversaries. So that $460,000, part of it probably went to buy Lamborghinis and leather jackets, but a good deal of it probably went to up their capability. So the attacks are going to get more brazen, and they're going to get more capable over time.
Rob Konecki, a question for you from our control room from executive producer Rhonda Schwartz. Rhonda?
So these attacks are getting more and more frequent. There were over 20 towns in Texas just last month with the same problem. Should it really be the job of each individual small town to deal with this on their own, or does something more need to be done at a federal level?
I think, unfortunately, what can be done to address these kinds of threats is really good IT and good IT security. It's not necessarily something that you can hope Cyber Command, the U.S. military, or the FBI are going to be able to address. These adversaries know what they're doing. They're operating from criminal safe havens around the world. We have very little hope that they will ever see the inside of a U.S. courtroom. And so from that perspective, the best defense is really going to be defense. It's really going to be to make the investments to secure your networks and protect your citizens' data.
Mayor Witt, let me ask you, you paid the money. What makes you think they won't hit you again? And if they do, are you more prepared?
Absolutely. Since then, we've made sure that we wasn't susceptible to it, and we have spent probably almost as much as the ransom, or we'll end up spending that much, and new equipment and being prepared the next time. Now I've learned that it's layers and layers and layers.
And do you have any sense from the FBI they're going to track down who hit you and took your money?
We certainly hope so. We know everybody's working. It's something that, as a nation, we're going to be seeing a lot more of. The smarter we get, the more they're going to advance, and it's just going to be an ongoing thing for us personally, businesses, hospitals, everybody.
What do you think would have happened if you had not paid the ransom? Was it really that vital to get those files and documents back?
I believe it was, because that was pretty much everything we had. It was all the records for years and years, our history, our operating information. It was a decision I had to make based on the citizens, not me personally. What would I do if it had been me personally, but what's best for the community?
Rob Konecki, let me ask you, how do they target cities like Lake City, Florida? How do they decide their targets?
Well, what they're really looking for is a target that's going to be able to pay a ransom, but that is also vulnerable to whatever tools they're using. So if they're able to get into the systems with, say, a spear phishing email targeted at a city worker, if that worker clicks on the email and gives them access to a system, from there, they're going to move through the system and start locking it up. So it's really a question of what is the target that is least defended but most likely to be able to pay a ransom to them in an amount that's going to make it worth their while.
And is it your sense, Rob, that these are individual criminal organizations, or is it nation state doing this?
Well, we've seen the full gamut. We've seen North Korea carry out very sophisticated ransomware attacks. We've seen the Russians carry out an attack, NotPetya, that was under the guise of ransomware. They actually, in the end, didn't care about collecting any kinds of ransoms. But we've also seen criminal groups that have grown increasingly sophisticated. And in some cases, it's really hard to tell the difference between a criminal group and a nation state group. In the case of Iran, you've got entities that are carrying out both the work of government as well as moonlighting.
And Mayor Witt, has your popularity suffered with your voters and your constituents in Lake City?
Well, I've really had no negative comments. You know, pretty much people understand where we were at and what our choices were. So I think they agreed that it was the right decision to make at the time.
And the insurance company came up with the money.
Yes, sir.
That surprised you that you're covered for that kind of thing? I'm surprised by that.
Yes, sir. I was.
But so out of your pocket, out of the town's taxpayers, it was just $10,000 to make good on this. Yeah.
Correct.
Well, Rob Konecki, they're making millions on this, I take it, from towns like Lake City and others.
Yeah, I mean, I think what we can say here is the right decision for Lake City was probably the wrong decision for the nation, because that money is going to go to what is going to be even more sophisticated attacks. So the next round may not be small cities in Texas. The next round may be large cities, federal departments, critical infrastructure. So the next ransomware attack, when it decides to take out Florida Power and Light, for instance, that's really going to hurt the citizens of Lake City.
Well, thank you, Rob Konecki, very much. And Mayor Witt in Florida, thank you very much for joining us. Coming up next, the tragic death of a young baseball player. An autopsy shows huge amounts of opioids and alcohol in his system. And now his family claims an employee of the Los Angeles Angels may have been involved. Does baseball have a drug problem? When we return. We turn now to the unexpected tragic death of a popular baseball player, a pitcher on the Los Angeles Angels by the name of Tyler Skaggs. The circumstances surrounding his death have now raised some serious questions for Major League Baseball, even as his team and his fans and his family mourned his death.
On the morning of Monday, July 1st, the Angels organization lost a member of its family, Tyler Skaggs. Tonight, while the grieving continues, the Angels and Mariners join fans across the nation and the baseball community in remembering this special young man. Tyler's mom, Debbie, will be tossing an honorary first pitch to Tyler's teammate and good friend, Andrew Heaney.
But now the Skaggs family and the team are about to square off in a potential legal battle. An autopsy found Skaggs had a mixture of oxycodone and fentanyl in his system and that he choked on his own vomit. And his family is claiming it was shocked to learn that the circumstances may involve an employee of the Los Angeles Angels. Major League Baseball told us today it is now investigating and unable to comment further. So to learn more, we're joined by one of the country's leading sports writers, Bill Shakin of the Los Angeles Times. Bill, thanks for joining us from Los Angeles via Skype. So what's the latest on this case?
The latest pretty much is what you said it was, Brian. The family had put out a statement after the release of the autopsy report saying they were surprised, as you mentioned, to learn that there might be the involvement of an Angels employee. They have so far not given any evidence to support that assertion. And in the meantime, you have investigations from Major League Baseball, from the attorneys representing Tyler Skaggs' family, and also from the police department in South Lake, Texas, which is where Tyler died. And until you get the results of all those investigations, I don't think we know where this is headed legally at all.
Baseball, Bill, does drug tests on its players for performance-enhancing drugs, but not so much for illegal drugs like cocaine or fentanyl or opioids.
Yeah, in the minor leagues where there is no players' union, Major League Baseball does test for what they call drugs of abuse, which include the opioids. In the major leagues, the union and the owners agreed on a proposal that was enacted It said for drugs of abuse, the priority should be treatment. It should not be punishment, because these are not things that are considered to enhance a player's performance. So, number one, you can't be tested for opiates unless there's some reason, some probable cause, you've been in a treatment program, something like that. If you do test positive, you're generally referred to counseling or treatment in some way, and your name is not publicly released as it would be if you tested positive for steroids.
As you know, in the background, baseball has had issues with cocaine and serious drug abuse, back to the 1985 case in Pittsburgh with so many players named there. And then recently, the pitcher for the Miami Marlins, Jose Fernandez, in a fatal boat accident found to have cocaine in his system. Do you think baseball has a larger issue here that we haven't heard much about, that's being covered up?
I don't know about a cover-up. It's hard to know if you have a problem if you don't have the data to back it up. So I think what will be interesting as the Skaggs investigation unfolds is, can the Skaggs family turn up any evidence that proves the assertion that the Angels might be involved? And if so, is it one rogue employee? Is there something beyond that? And again, is there information that would support any idea that maybe this does go beyond Tyler Skaggs? Right now, we just don't know.
And were you surprised at the allegation that an employee, not a player, but an employee might be involved?
A little bit. I mean, you don't really want to say that unless you have some reason to say it. I don't think once you've lawyered up, your lawyer would encourage you to say something unless you had some reason to believe that. But on the other hand, again, the Skaggs family has not yet provided the evidence, so we'll have to wait and see.
Well, Bill Shakin, the Los Angeles Times, thanks so much. Much more to come on this story. We appreciate it. We'll stay in touch.
All right, Brian.
Up next, our shout-out for the reporter breaking big stories and allegations of corruption involving one of the country's most powerful union leaders, with reports the FBI found wads of cash in his garage, when we come back. And our shout-out tonight for the federal courts reporter at the Detroit News, who for the last 2 years has been breaking some very big stories about one of this country's most significant labor unions, the United Auto Workers, the UAW. Detroit is a union town, and the annual Labor Day Parade is a big event. But the news coverage this year was driven by the revelation that the city's most powerful union leader, Gary Jones, the president of the United Auto Workers, the UAW, is the subject of an FBI investigation of alleged corruption. A story broken by Robert Snell of the Detroit News.
There were protesters, union workers protesting, decrying the reports of corruption that have come out of federal court. Gary Jones marched for part of the parade, declined comment to reporters on the scene, and left before the parade was finished.
Snell, who covers the federal courts for the Detroit News, first started working on the UAW corruption story some 2 years ago.
Yeah, there's a lot of outrage in some circles. The workers fear that this is confirmation of what they've suspected, that some UAW leaders might just be out for themselves and not for the average blue-collar worker.
So far, 9 people have been convicted, the latest this week in federal court in Detroit. The union has sought to portray the convictions as not that significant.
I mean, I think we're fairly well sourced with, people close to the investigation, and there hasn't been a challenging of any of the facts. What they have tried to focus reporters on is that this is merely a few bad apples who have been charged and convicted, and that this doesn't represent a broader crisis for the UAW.
But this past week, Snell and his colleagues Brianna Noble and Ian Thibodeau broke the story that the union president himself, Jones, was part of the investigation, with exclusive coverage of an FBI raid on Jones's home.
During the search, the investigators had left the garage door open at Gary Jones' home, and one of the neighbors across the street who was watching this dramatic federal search unfold grabbed his binoculars and could see agents in the garage with the open garage door counting what this neighbor described as wads of cash really sort of a dramatic description of what was unfolding on the scene.
Today, federal agents descended on the homes of some top officials with one of the nation's largest unions.
The raid on the home of the UAW president was picked up by news organizations across the country who had pretty much ignored the story until now.
Today, FBI special agents searching inside the Canton, Michigan home of UAW President Gary Jones.
It's been somewhat of a lonely beat. Once we broke the news that the FBI and IRS and Labor Department were investigating and searching multiple locations around the country, the coverage mushroomed. You started to see the financial wires and pretty much every major newspaper, Wall Street Journal, start to weigh in and cover the developments from last week.
The allegations are reminiscent of the blatant corruption at the Teamsters Union, something I covered in my early days as an NBC News correspondent.
Rabbi Rudolph Rosenthal characterized Burns.
Except now, there are a lot fewer reporters assigned to cover such stories.
It's tough in the newspaper industry with fewer resources, but thankfully my editors have stayed committed to the story for over 2 years. So it's a matter of what we're going to devote resources to, and this is, like you said, a union town. It's a big story in Detroit, and we've been staying on top of it for 2 years plus.
And there's more to come, you think?
For sure, definitely.
In a statement, the UAW says the union and its president, Gary Jones, have always fully cooperated with the government investigation and suggests what it calls profit-laden auto companies stand to benefit from media leaks, false assumptions, and political grandstanding. But from what we can see, none of that would apply to Rob Snell and the Detroit News. So that's our program for tonight. Thanks so much for joining us. We'll see you back here again next week.